This video is sponsored by EBSCO Industries, Bank of Moundville, Moundville Telephone Company, and Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
At this moment, we're going to be able to show you some of this copper work by Miss Tammy Beane. And here we go, Miss Tammy.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to tell you about copper, which is kind of a little snapshot into the culture here at Moundville and into the Southeast culture. It just kind of gives you a little window of kind of what was going on. Some of the first copper is from the Hopewell culture up in the Ohio Valley. And that's from about 100 BC to about 400 AD. And a lot of it's animal images, one-dimensional, not a lot of relief type copper. And it was most of it was mined from up around the Great Lakes area. We get a little bit of copper in Alabama with the Copina culture. This is a bar gorget from North Alabama. And some of the copper, this is what they call float copper, and I actually got it off eBay. A lot of copper were actually smaller nuggets that would erode out, and then they would pound them down. And usually from about, I don't know, like a paper thickness to about cardstock thickness is what they would actually make the pieces out of with it. As time goes on, when you get into Mississippian culture, like 500 to 1,000 years ago, you start getting more of the relief copper. And that's what they've got here at Moundville. These are some of the pieces from Moundville here. And if you come visit the museum, you'll see the originals in the museum cases. The different colors is just the oxidation, about like you see a copper penny, how it'll oxidize, or the Statue of Liberty. These right here are what they call badges. And you see them all over the Southeast, Etowah, all the way over here. And as you go through time, they actually change shape and get a little more rounded. But they go from Mississippian through proto-historic. These were actually found here at Moundville, the originals. These are reproductions that are in the exhibit. And you can see them on the mannequin too, on a headdress on the mannequin. But they get more rounded, and they're actually made out of brass by the time you get to proto-historic time. And instead of having the relief on them, they're actually engraved. So this is something that kind of went through time all the way up through proto-historic. With the Creek people, on the early accounts, they said it was a gift. Copper was gifts from the Great Spirit to the Creek people at Tuckabatchie. They actually have an account of that actually being said about Tuckabatchie. And by the time it gets to the Southeast, most of the copper is probably coming from the Appalachian chain. They've done analysis on copper at Etowah Mounds, and all that's coming from the Appalachians, not from the Great Lakes. So it's kind of assuming Moundville's probably the same way as Etowah Mounds. Probably most of the stuff here is from actually the Appalachian chain. A lot of it is from smaller little pieces, and they would actually pound them out flat and rivet them together like poke holes, and then they would make like little cones, put through it, and hammer it together on both sides. So they would have a piece large enough to make some of the large copper. We pulled this set here is from Illinois, the whooping plates. We pulled the originals from Washington State University, and it's probably maybe like 20 little pieces riveted together on the original. And when you start looking at the larger pieces at all the sites, it's a bunch of little pieces riveted together, but they're so finely done, it looks like a jeweler did them. This one here that I've been working on is from Etowah Mounds. And when you start looking at some of the original on the larger pieces, you can actually kind of get the side of them. You can see how it's stair-stepped up, not just tooled. Like these here at Moundville are more tooled on the smaller ones. So they probably weren't done on any type of form. But some of these other ones that are stair-stepped up, they have found forms at spiral mounds. This is made just out of paper. They would have used probably bark to kind of get that layered, to get it going. And pretty much you get it on there, and then I've just got some bone needles here. So I'll go back and just kind of work it. And if I'm doing one of the tooled ones like this, I'll just work it on one side, and then get a rounded thing to do the other, just to kind of round it off. But they would work it one way, work it the other way. And if it gets where it's not working good, you can heat it, and it loosens up all the little molecules in there where you can work it better. After you work it a while, it's like it tightens it up. And in the Southeast, they didn't do any smelting, like actually melting the copper. They would just basically anneal it, where you just heat it and hammer it and heat it and hammer it where it's workable, but no smelting where they actually melted it. And one thing I like to show too on the copper like this, it's almost like a snapshot in time. This one's actually from Etowah Mounds, and it was a matriarchal uh, belief system. So the women basically ruled everything, and this is a woman. And you can kind of see the symbolism with the wings and how she would have dressed, probably for something really ceremonial at Etowah Mounds. And you see that pretty much the bird theme carries through on a lot of stuff. You get raptor claws, these from Illinois, the same thing with the bird theme on them. And just about everything has ear spools. This one here is from Etowah Mounds, from Spiral Mounds. And you get ear spools on it too. And they actually had ear spools, copper covered ear spools. A lot of them are made out of stone, and they would just cover them and they would button it in their ears, about like you see gauges nowadays. That's basically one of the decorations with it. You can see it on this one too, with the ear spools. And you get a lot of headdresses where you can kind of see this one coming off here, and this one coming off, yeah, right there. And this one coming off over here on the one from Spyro. A lot of these were basically headdresses that they would put like a bone or a piece of cane so they could stick it in their hair and have it up. And it wasn't just for show. The more elite had it, but it had a religious, spiritual kind of power within itself, and it would be handed down generations, bundles, and only certain people could handle it. And certain people could actually make it too. Here at Moundville, around Mound Q, they've actually found scrap pieces. Like there's actually a workshop here at Moundville, which is kind of fascinating to think that they're trading the copper in, working it, cutting it, and actually putting it together here. Let's crank it up. I think what else? The tools that I use, this is just a ulna bone out of a deer leg. It works really well, and just a piece of wood with some brain tan on it. Works really well to do it. Copper is just one of those, like I said, like a snapshot. You're not going to see any photographs or pictures, but you can really see kind of a little bit of the culture. Just about everything has either like the forked eye or the forks around the mouth. It's kind of the same symbolism all over. And as you go through time with these badges, like here at Moundville, as it gets more into the proto-historic, it's not like they're keeping the really fancy stuff. They're starting to trade smaller pieces, like gifting them symbolism in between the different communities and everything. Can you think of any other questions?
How did you get into the copper work?
I usually do pottery reproductions, and John O'Hare had one of the archaeologists had asked me if I'd ever tried it. It's like, no, but it's fascinating. I mean, I'd seen all the pictures from Spyro and Etowah Mounds and here, and that's what got me into figuring out, well, how did they do it? And then we went and pulled the originals to actually look and see how they were put together and everything. And some of these, like the ones from Spiral Mounds, they were mounted like on wood or leather. So I don't think they mass produced them, but some of them did have backing on them.
Well, when you're making a piece like this, especially if you're making one of the large pieces like this, how long does that take to do? Because I know you do it all by hand with your own tools. How long does it usually take for you to make a piece like this falcon here?
Probably a day.
About a day.
But the originals, when we pulled them from Washington University, it looked like a jeweler had made them. This is like a really poor quality compared to the originals. And they had to work past all these little pieces too. But it's so finely done. It looks like a jeweler did them. I mean, they're just amazing. So I imagine it was a real specialty job that they had, and probably certain people, that's all they did, to be able to take it from the raw nugget, put it together, and hammer it out. I'm working from craft copper, and like I said, the originals look like jewelers did them. They're amazing.
As far as I know, you said there's a lot of bird images that were there any other animal images that you've seen?
Oh yeah, you get spiders. Geez, birds, spiders, uh, mostly birds, but you do get some spiders in there.
Have you ever noticed any of them that were like water birds or anything like that?
It's hard to tell. Most of them are more on the raptor type. Most of them have the claw things coming down on them, or morphed in claws.
I know usually with me, I'm looking at the stuff that I've seen. Most of them are like falcons and hawks that you
Mm-hmm.
see mostly. You don't see eagles. You see falcons and
Yeah,
hawks and things
yeah,
like that, or woodpeckers.
yeah.
You know,
And you get a lot of with the falcon stuff. You get a lot of like the spots and stuff. Where you could actually kind of identify uh, what type bird it is.
well, like the ear spools that you showed up here. I think when I look at that, I think a lot of the young people that are putting gauges in their ears, they think that's new. Well, you think if you look back 1,000 years, our
Mm-hmm.
people were making this stuff. You know.
I always, when I'm at a program and I see them come up, it's like, you need some real ones. So those plastic ones that you've got in there. But yeah, same thing with the tattoos. Uh, what's old is new again on it.
The ones that you have here, with the like these here, what
Mm.
are those called again?
Uh, in archaeology, they're referred to as badges. I mean, and a lot of them are like headdress type. Some are found around the shoulders and the neck part. Could have been like earrings. In the context they were actually found in. The mannequin has the headdress in the exhibit up there at the museum.
Well, what's neat about this, and I'm looking at the stuff that you have up here. Sometimes, even I've even seen some of this stuff made out of stone or slate,
Hmm.
almost identical to some of the stuff that you have here.
You see it on pottery too, and shell.
Right.
The same symbolism on shell, more so than pottery. Shell and copper to me just go hand in hand, but you do get a little bit of it on pottery too. But you're right on slate. They have I guess it's that red slate or red
Red slate,
stone
yeah, like
that
what they
has,
call Catlin.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's in the museum that has the hand and the eye on it. That's from here.
I've seen it in greenstone, Catlinite, and quite a few. But that greenstone that you definitely, when you're talking about copper, like you were talking about
Hmm.
copper, about trade, it was definitely a trade going on because we're down here, especially in the lower parts of Alabama and Louisiana and Mississippi, you won't find copper. So
Not at
it
all.
definitely had to be a trade.
Definitely, yeah, yeah. We don't have it at all. And to find actual workshop where you have little pieces where they were doing it. Cahokia Mounds has a workshop area up there, up in Illinois, and Etowah Mounds over in Georgia has a workshop area. So, from what we know on archaeology, and a lot of sites have been destroyed, there's still stuff that hasn't been discovered. But that's three main copper working areas right there, major sites.
Did you find that besides, so later on they were using brass, right?
Hmm.
But did you find any other type of metals besides copper that they made it out of?
Not for this type stuff. Down in Florida, they have one site, and I can't think of the name right off, that's got a little bit of silver and gold, but that's the only site I know of. And there
That's
might be
rare.
more.
Yeah.
It's really rare. It's with that what's that culture down there? Calusa?
Yeah, Calusa, yeah.
Yeah, it's with that down there. But I don't really know the exact time frame, but I know it's just like one of those pieces that sticks out because you don't see it.
Oh yeah, that definitely had to be trade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Where everything else is pretty much copper, stone, slate, greenstone.
Well, it's neat that people that this actually did just survive because a lot of things that were made out of wood because they made tons of stuff out of
Mm-hmm.
wood, but it disintegrated. So luckily we have these things that you can see because they were able to survive the many years of being in the ground.
And the copper helped preserve some of it, like the basket that these were in on the Malton plates was like a stash of them stacked up together. It preserved the basket on it. Some of the material at Spiral Mounds was preserved because of the copper. Um, so the copper kind of helped in some instances on stuff that usually wouldn't survive with it.
If someone wanted to get into doing copper work, like what would you suggest?
I would suggest Sun Circle and Human Hands. It's an older book, but it's wonderful. And Google. You can get all kinds of articles on it. Google Mississippian copper or Hopewell copper, and it'll give you all kinds of sites and everything else on it. We're in an age now where you don't have to wait and go to a library and pull books. You've got it right at your fingertips if you're interested in it. You can Google it and see all kinds of images. Read basically how they're doing it. The latest thing comes out. This is a Southeastern Archaeological Conference, and it's got a really good article, the latest issue of it. So you're going to get the latest thing if you Google, and you don't actually have to have the publication. You can actually pick it up.
Did they? Did you? I mean, have you found that they made any tools out of the copper or not?
They did for flint knapping. You get all kinds of copper tools for flint knapping. Pan pipes with the Hopewell stuff. You'll get pan pipes actually made with cane with copper around it to hold it together. Flint knapping, you get all kinds of pressure flakers, and they do have some axes that were probably more ceremonial because copper is a fairly soft metal, but they look like axes made out of it. Usually it's just the axe part set in wood, like a wood handle.
Oh, for yeah, like you
Yeah.
said, ceremonial
Yeah.
purposes.
Yeah.
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 I noticed one thing that here, you have a lot of things, but I know they used to do almost like a headband or crown
Mm-hmm.
out of the copper. You know.
You see a lot of that with the Hopewell when you
Right.
get up in Ohio, where it almost has like antlers and everything else worked in out of copper. You get a lot of mask. Etowah Mounds actually has one too, but I've seen it with the Hopewell, where they actually have like a face that's made out of wood that's covered, and it's really thin, almost like a gold leaf, but it's like almost like a copper leaf, where they've stretched the copper basically so thin that it'd go further to get it on there and easier to manipulate it on there too. Copper was just a really significant part of, I guess, the religious culture in the Southeast, and it connects basically all these groups of people. I guess on the spiritual level, and it wasn't just their objects or anything like that. They actually had basically power within themselves. Each piece had its own power.
Well, if you notice, I mean, I notice on a lot you have the crosses, which represent the four directions
Right.
on a lot of them. But then you also have a lot of sun symbols on those
Right.
too.
Right. And you see that on pottery.
Oh yeah.
And shale.
Did you ever find any that had what we call mortuary type? That because I know on some of the pottery there are skulls and bones and things like that. Did you ever see any of those things on the copper pieces?
The only thing I can really think is something like you see the head pots with the Nodina culture out of Arkansas. That's what I always think of with this one from Spiral Mounds. It reminds me of one of the head pots. And even with the head pots, to put that much time and work in it, same way with the copper piece, I don't think it's an enemy. I think it's more giving homage to somebody that you really cared about, because you wouldn't spend that much time on somebody you didn't like. I don't think. I think this is really like something special as a remembrance of somebody. Same thing with the head pots. When we pulled the woofing plates, and they were one of the first ones that I actually looked at up at Washington University, the quality and the detail, I was just blown away. It's like, how can you hammer out a nugget and get that distinct detail and quality? And I was having a hard time just getting it on sheet copper that I can work easy, much less hammering out a nugget, riveting it together, and just the quality of workmanship was just fantastic. Just that's, I think, the most amazing thing that I've seen in copper is the quality of work, the skill that went with it.
Well, it's neat to think that a lot of people today that do metal work and silver work and stuff, all the tools that they use, they're thinking about, all they used basically were bone tools and stone tools.
That's it.
And look how fine they did. So these
Mhm.
people knew what they were doing.
Exactly. They were good. Just fantastic artists. And they didn't have the cheater glasses or the
No.
bright lights and everything that we have to work with.
My name's Greyhawk, and it's been a pleasure with the virtual. I usually see this stuff, at the festival, but virtually being able to experience this, and people that usually don't get a chance to come out to the festival because you might live too far, and you're actually seeing this is neat that you get to see this, and people like Miss Tammy that take some of these things and they preserve this, which is great because a lot of the artists here at Moundville, they're doing stuff that you really don't see anymore. That basically, if they wouldn't be doing it, it would disappear and it'd be for the ages. And so it's great to see artists like Miss Tammy out here doing these things and keeping our culture alive.
To support Moundville Archaeological Park, please consider visiting festival.museums.ua.edu and clicking Support Moundville at the top of the page.